And I was reflecting that in a way, when you encounter existentialism, it almost becomes a little bit like the air that you breathe. It becomes the way. When I think of existentialism, where it originates, it seems to me to originate in reaction, in a way, to the more analytical or conceptual traditions of philosophy. So if you look at Kierkegaard, when Kierkegaard came into his own, and he was a very prolific writer, it was just after the time of Hegel, and dialectics and Marxism at the same time, developed at the same time as Kierkegaard's philosophy. And Kierkegaard, in a way, reacted. He was a very Christian philosopher, but his very own style of Christianity, and in a way reacted to Lutheranism, to the Lutheranism of the Danish church. So what the reaction is a reaction out of this mental space, this mental world of mental concepts, you know, Kant and Hegel, etc., into what's our direct lived world. How do we live? How are we in the world? And what are the things that we face in the world? So in a way, for me, existentialism is a practice as much as anything else. It is not just a philosophy where we go out and we sit under a tree and reflect. It is a practice, and it's a practice that's hermeneutic. In other words, it always starts from what we know, and it always starts from what we encounter in the world directly. In that sense, it's also phenomenological. So you will find a lot of the phenomenologists can also be seen as existentialists. There's Sartre makes a key statement about existentialism in that lecture that he gave, Existentialism is a Humanism, where he says existence before essence. So he says, and that in a way you can see is a reaction to Plato as well, the Platonic idea of the ideal forms and the idealism of much of German philosophy, etc., is existence before essence. So we don't talk about human nature. We don't even wonder about human nature. We go to the human experience directly. And you will see that in some of the other existential philosophers, notably Heidegger. Heidegger went back and he said, but what is being? What does it mean to be? I think it's almost become a cliche that we speak about, we are human beings, we are not human doings. Well, it's perhaps a cliche that we can sit a little bit longer with and let it percolate a bit, because there is a big value in that. Erich Fromm spoke about modes of existence, you know, the having mode and the being mode. All of these philosophers in some way wanted to get more direct access to our sense of being in the world, which is a concept that Heidegger used. This being is different from the Heidegger's, when he speaks about this experience of being, or, you know, being itself is not really experience. Being is being. We don't experience being, we be being. That in most of our lives, we don't really experience that. And that experience he refers to as das Mann, the man. It is the generalized, sort of almost automatic experience of the world. Nietzsche spoke of the herd. There are people who just follow the rules, etc., etc. They don't live into their full humanity, into their full experience of humanity. Part of that very important theme in existentialism is the theme of self-deception. Sartre uses the words mauvais fait, which means bad faith. One of his translators translated it as the self-deception, which I think is okay. I like mauvais fait, and another translation for that, of course, is bullshit. It is bullshitting ourselves. And there's actually a book by a guy called Harry Frankfurter called On Bullshit, a very precise little philosophical treatise on bullshit. And it's this idea that we don't tell ourselves the truth about ourselves. We don't face up to the real world that we are facing. Now, that tradition we can find right back to the time of Plato in the philosopher Diogenes. Plato called Diogenes the bad Socrates. He was he was rebelling against the academy and all of these philosophical ideas and talk. And his thing was, here I am. I need to defecate, and I need to live somewhere, and I need to eat, and I need some sun on my body. And here you are all talking about these ideals and these ideas. So it's right to bring back people into their direct experience of life. He gave the name to the philosophical tradition of the Cynics, which comes from the word kinos, and kinos means dog. And Diogenes was called the dog philosopher because he lived like a dog outside in a barrel. And from him came this whole idea of let's look at things as they really are and confront them as they really are. Heidegger works further with that, and Lucille mentioned Camus. Something in Camus' book, The Myth of, he wrote one of his most important philosophical books is The Myth of Sisyphus, in which he deals with the question of suicide. And what's interesting in this book from the self-deception perspective is that he refuses to have a metaphysical escape. So we're not going to justify our lives on the basis of God, for instance. We're not going to justify our decisions on the basis of some external force. We have to justify and find meaning and find the reason for what we are doing and the motivation for what we are doing it right here. And they're the most important question, because the world is absurd, because if there's no God and we're just living in this universe, we can come to no other conclusion than it is absurd. We have to ask ourselves the question, well, should we stay alive or shouldn't we stay alive? So I see Camus, and I see the young people are really interested in Camus. They're really drawn by this idea of Camus. One of the big statements that comes out of the myth of Sisyphus is one must imagine Sisyphus happy. You know, Sisyphus was rolling up the boulder, up the hill, and then every night it would roll down. And then the next morning they have to roll it up again. So this is like absurd, pointless work. But Camus says, we must imagine Sisyphus happy. My daughter told me there's a little meme that says, we must imagine Sisyphus committing suicide, which I thought was funny engagement that you have with this idea of absurdity. Something that also comes then in this idea of existence as important, and existence means to stand out. It is here is this world of, and we are here, and then to exist is not just it is to stand out. The meaning of the word human in Greek as well, anthropos, also means to stand out. And to stand out also means that we encounter boundaries. The philosopher Jaspers, the existential philosopher, he was a Christian existential philosopher. Jaspers calls them boundary situations. Those situations like death, where we are brought towards the edge and right confronted with the inevitable and the absolutes and the most transformative possibilities of our lives. We can see them as the key confrontations that we have with our world and our lives. One of the big boundaries that we do have in life are conditions that we are given. Sartre says man is condemned to be free, so we have to be. We have no choice. We are free. always link that back to something that Karl Marx said. He said, we make history, but in conditions not of our own making. And there's this balance between those two aspects. And those big things are things that are really important for us, and that comes very strongly out in the Africana tradition as well. It is questions of gender and race, and so on. And there's actually one or two quotes that I want to read to you that is from an African philosopher, Achille Mbembe, that deals with this question of race. Gender, of course, Sartre's friend and lover, Simone de Beauvoir, she wrote The Second Sex, in which she says that you are not born a woman, you become a woman. It's not a given, it's something that you learned. Started this interrogation of what we receive socially, what we construct socially, and how we deal with that. And then the race is incredibly important in this. In race, several thinkers, race and colonialism. I think sometimes when we speak a lot about the European tradition and then an Africana tradition, and the Africana tradition, the decolonial tradition in existentialism is really a very strong standing up against the traditions of colonialism, because of the way in which the colonial subject was constructed, the way in which when you are black you become black, and now that's a key factor. The book of Achille Mbembe is called Critique of Black Reason, that specifically deals with that black question. And Fanon was a medical doctor. He observed this right up front and made a call to revolution, call to violence, to overthrow this, to stand up in this blackness and to reclaim it and to reframe it, which is an interesting discourse at the moment as well with all our risk. So this is what I want to read you from Mbembe's book, where he writes very appreciatingly about Fanon. He says, if there's one thing that will never die in Fanon, it is the project of the collective rise of humanity. In his eyes, this irrepressible and implacable quest for liberty required the mobilization of all life's reserves. Each human subject and each people was to engage in a grand project of self-transformation, in a struggle to the death without reserve. They had to take it on as their own. They could not delegate it to others. And then he speaks about this. This is the duty to revolt, to rise up, became an injunction. And I think that to quite a significant extent informed the thought of Biko, and informed the thought of much of the decolonial tradition, in which we engage with what it means to be black as the not white, black as the mysterious, black as the inhuman. And in much of the existentialism in the Africana tradition, it is really about this reclaiming of black as human. And someone asked me the other day, what do whites lose by racism? What's the cost of racism to white people? And anyway, it's hard to think that it's anything else but our humanity that we give up. So that's why the decolonial is. It's almost sometimes when I speak to friends of other parts of the world, they see the splits in the world as West versus East, or North versus South, etc., etc. There's a huge sense in which the split in the world is a split between the black world and the white world, both as constructed worlds with a certain reality. Just finally, about on this reflection, is I think existentialism is a therapeutics. It's therapeutic. The work of existentialism, even as a philosophy, is therapeutic. It is a way to it is a way of thinking that has an healing intent. It is a way of thinking that has the intent of the recovery of humanity, of our full humanity. And in that sense, I also think we can ask ourselves what are the current and the coming issues that we may have to, that we can address and approach from existentialist perspectives. And here it would be things like the ecological crisis and what it means to be human in the ecological crisis. What it means to be human when the human is no longer at the center of the world, no longer at the center of the universe. So there's something about anthropos that stands out, that no longer stands out. We become more like human, which is humus, which is soil. That connection. What happens when we start to see ourselves in relation to the other living creatures and the earth as a living creature herself? And then, of course, big questions that comes with that. The questions of isolation in our world, questions of death of civilization, which is something that we are most certainly facing, and perhaps even the death of humanity. Who knows? And how we make sense of that, how we approach that, how we deal with it, how we answer those questions. So I think I'll stop here, Lucille.
I think that was a